of the Secretariat of the Special Advisory Body, Ministry of Finance. And this session will be moderated by Dr. Alizan Mahadi, Senior Economist at the UNDP Malaysia, who previously served as the Senior Director of Research at ISIS Malaysia and is a founding member of the APPGM SDG and a frequent commentator on current affairs. Dr. Alizan, you have the floor.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera and a very good morning. Welcome to the fireside chat on Sustainable Finance in Focus with the one and only, the esteemed Madam Nurul Izzah Anwar. There's no fire on this side, but I hope we will insert some fire within the chat this morning. Now, I think Madam Nurul Izzah really doesn't need any introduction. But I think for today, it's also your capacity as the co-chair of the Secretariat of the Advisory Committee to the Finance Minister as well. Now, as Yang Ditua Tan Sri Speaker said, let's speak about SDGs. And as you mentioned, the SDGs, we are at the middle point now. We have about 6-7 years left to achieve the SDGs, and we are not on track. In fact, a study by UNSCAP estimated that we will achieve SDGs only by 2065. So we were meant to achieve it by 2030, but we are now, which is only about 6 years, but we are now on track to achieve it in 42 years. One of the biggest gaps is in terms of financing. Another estimate highlights that to finance the SDGs, there is about $4 trillion gap per year annually to achieve the SDGs by 2030. So by 2030, that's almost 30 million in terms of financing gap. Now, the good news is that while these sums are very big, that there is money out there. And I think many here from the financial institutions and so on know that there is money out there in terms of institutional assets, with institutional investors, so on and so forth. But the key is how to mobilize this money, how to find the right mix in terms of financial instruments as well. But also, in terms of the government as well, this requires both mobilizing, managing public funds, as well as crowding in and also scaling up private finance as well. And these are some of the issues that we will touch on in today's fireside chat. So maybe, Madam Nurul Izzah, can you just firstly introduce a bit what you're doing at the Advisory Committee to the Finance Minister? I know it addresses many of the big structural issues, such as looking into our revenue, looking into our national debt, looking into subsidies and also GLCs. But how does this also relate to sustainability?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam Malaysia Madani, salam hormat. Dr. Alizan, it's a pleasure to see you again. The last time we met, we were in Permatang Pauh. Thanks to your all-parliamentary group. Yang saya kasih here, Tan Sri Speaker, Tan Sri Johari, Saudara Firuz, the organizers, both the UN and the Malaysian Parliament. I think it's a very important fireside chat because we are here gathered and we have accepted one true fact: the world is on fire. And if you just need to go through when you work or you enjoy outdoors, the increasing temperature that has reached beyond 32 degrees Celsius, many more days compared to previously. Now, I just want to touch a little bit on financing because our Tan Sri Speaker has announced by next year, inshallah, the Malaysian Parliament will be powered by renewables. I just want to refer to a WEF and Khazanah KRI published report of this year, just to make sure Malaysia achieves the target of 70% renewables in our installed capacity mix by 2050. We need an estimated 637 billion Malaysian ringgit. Yeah? So at the current exchange rate, 140 billion US dollars. And it cannot be financed purely from the private sector, although we want more. It also has to be included in how the government plans and utilizes its coffers. So back to what we do at ACFIN. So, we at ACFIN, we serve Tan Sri Hassan Marikan, a group of advisors, as Dr. Alizan rightly pointed out, on 4 key areas. I tried my very best with the team to kind of match it with the SDG goals. Because for me, it's very important, right? How we might be disappointed, rightly so, with the conduct of developed nations who themselves form 60% of global emission. Malaysia stands at only 0.37%. So I'm not saying we don't have to achieve net zero, but if they fail, we have to face the consequences. And that adds on to our financing of climate adaptation itself, to protect our industries and so on. So ACFIN, again, was established by February 2023 of this year. We have Dr. Nong Sari, we have Prof. Rajarasya, and a few other economists, analysts, kind of powering some of the research that we do and recommendations to the federal government. Not everything is, of course, accepted. At the end of the day, it is based on the decisions made by the cabinet. Now, you alluded to government revenue and expenditure. I'm going to go straight to this, because we talk about ways and means to increase the nation's revenue base and reduce operating expenditure. But I think my favorite is on the issues of subsidy and social protection, because we spend a lot on unproductive fuel, subsidies. But in terms of reducing poverty, it doesn't go as far as similar or like other countries who have used the same amount. On this, we are guided by the government's commitment to the 17 UN SDGs, and specifically the Government Revenue Task Force. We are advocating for fiscal sustainability, Doc, in line with the recent promulgation of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. You cannot bind the government, its hands, in terms of how much it can spend. It has to go back to Parliament to gain acceptance if it has to increase the level of deficit. And we have been running a fiscal deficit for the past 25 years. Now, deficit in itself, I'm sure you know this, it's not bad if it's used for productive purposes. I think it's important to take note of the work by Stephanie Kelton on the deficit myth. But if it's used to pay our interests on our loans, then it's certainly problematic. So the fiscal balance, it depends on the strength of our revenue growth. We know that the federal government's expenditures are rising very fast. So we do want to make sure it's maintained within a particular limit to ensure stability in the economy and the clear fundamentals to ensure confidence in the country's growth prospects. Now, for subsidy and social protection, my favorite, the strategies that we are rationalizing, we work closely with EPF, our Employees Provident Fund. We want to retarget subsidies, so meaning retarget them from the unproductive use currently to enhance social assistance and social insurance agendas consistent with Malaysia's SDG pledge by 2030 and the 12th Malaysia Plan. So this is aligned well, Doc, by SDG or with SDG goal 1.3, which is to establish nationally appropriate social protection systems and measures for all, including flaws. I just want to end with this point because sometimes people think social protection is crucial for the most vulnerable. But it's a good reminder, as Dr. Stephen Kidd, who's one of the social protection experts that we refer to, any one of us, members of parliament, Wong Chen, non-members of parliament, those who didn't make it, normal workers, at any part of your life, you can be vulnerable. So what is the kind of insurance or systemic support that can help you somewhat buttress the shocks?
Thank you. I think that's a very good start. Let me continue on that note a bit in terms of, you've kind of highlighted how you've aligned many of these activities with the SDGs. Is there any effort to systematically integrate sustainability into the advisory committee, or is this more outside the mandate?
You know, I think at the end of the day, it's very important to keep the SDGs in mind. So we do that, even though the 4 key areas, I think I should also mention all of them in case everyone's wondering. There's also government-owned entities. We look at the reforming of SOEs and GOEs, and of course managing national debt. So I think, you know, in one form or another, informally, it is linked, but we try our very best, especially in the task force of subsidy and social protection, to link them with the targets. Because if you meet the targets, it provides for a clear-cut benchmark. What is it that we're missing? Maybe certain things we can do better. What are the countries that we can compare or learn from? Because at the end of the day, we also want to design unique solutions that meet Malaysia's needs.
Okay, just again, we spoke a bit about SDGs not being on track. Now, generally, in terms of the advisory committee's recommendations, what would success look like to you? What are the outcomes, especially in terms of sustainability in a few years?
So I think if you look at Tan Sri Hassan's style, we could have done or should have done everything yesterday. So I think, you know, the committee from February, it's been a very fast-paced effort. We understand that at the end of the day, we can provide recommendations. But I think that's why we are asking that everyone, whether those from the civil society, those we worked with in the different organizations, echo the same ask, make the same demands. Because we also need to know what are our key priorities, right? I think the issue of rationalization, for example, we understand fuel subsidies are not good for the environment, yes, but if you don't plug in the expectations of people who are in need, how then would they buttress or support the increasing cost of living? So I think those kind of arguments, we understand, it certainly measures highly in the decision-making by cabinet ministers, by the government, because if you look at the example in Iran, there was an ILO paper when the fuel prices were made up to 90% of the market price. I think they helped supplant services in the educational, healthcare sectors. But it was done over, if I'm not mistaken, 10 years. Yeah? And of course, Indonesia itself, I remember going to Jakarta when there were large-scale demonstrations because harga minyak sudah naik ya, petrol. Jadi, of course, again, these are the considerations, and I don't take it lightly. You look at the previous governments, the previous efforts, but those are instructive. At the end of the day, I think time is running out. I speak to different stakeholders. It's just that how do we together communicate the same message empathetically? It's not like we know better. You have to listen to this. No, it's actually we are all in this together. And if we don't invest, we're not fast enough in plugging the needs for our benefit, not for the benefit of some demands made by the Western nations, then we're going to face challenges.
I think that nicely fits into the next question and the theme of the GO-ESG, which is in terms of inclusive, sustainable finance. And I think, again, you've touched on quite a lot of the need for ensuring, in many ways, any subsidy rationalization doesn't hurt the most vulnerable communities and so on, and social protection also being one of those focus areas. So how do you ensure, or how do you do the strategy to prioritize inclusivity within the plans of the committee and the recommendations of the committee, and really, in general, how do you ensure that, especially the most vulnerable communities are being, benefit from these recommendations?
Dr. Alizan, one of the things we did was we made sure front and center linked to the issue of rationalization of subsidy is a more holistic social protection system. I think people forget that second part. Why? Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to save money? Explain to people that we're plugging in to manage their needs. And of course, that's why in our recommendation in our task force is done in tandem. Prof. Ye, Kim Ling, who's our lead for this task force, has made sure that, from the very beginning when we asked EPF to share their thoughts, we are going to be an aging society, Tan Sri, aging scouts everywhere. So we need, it's true, and it's important as we age faster than we should, then we need to make sure that we plan for the looming challenges when a lot of those, even as EPF, within the EPF system, there was a 2018 paper on multidimensional poverty amongst EPF retirees. And majority of them are women who are most deprived because women age longer and they're going to be far more deprived as their partner passes away or just to manage on their own. So I think these are the things that we are including in the planning, but maybe we should talk more about it. Sometimes we talk a lot about, removing fuel subsidies, which is, again, something that's needed because you have to plug in this money. It is being, 5 minutes left, okay, being used unwisely. But I think it's also very, very crucial to speak about it. And I think people would appreciate, for me, it's important to put ourselves into the household of B40. And it's not, we think it's not dynamic. It's constantly moving. We're always, from M40 back to B40. It's not that simple where, you of course, there's less movement at T20, but the point is, it's a dynamic change and we have to always strengthen the middle part. I just wanted to add, so in this regard, I think that urgency, when you see the crisis that's taking place in Gaza, humanitarian crisis, that's why we want to strengthen more the UN mechanisms, making sure that every one of us acts based on a moral compass. But when the targets are not taking into account the needs of Global South, the needs of countries that are developing, then it loses its relevance. So I think just to make it far more fairer, because even net zero, I would add on, not just with net zero, there's also climate adaptation needs. Yes. There are countries who are going to face flooding challenges. Who's going to fund this? We're supposed to have 100 trillion, but that's nothing in comparison to what is actually needed to help countries that are, far more vulnerable.
So, 15,000 for a table is nothing compared to that. But
true, but then the scouts must also be there to help the most vulnerable when floods hit, challenges hit. That is the purpose. You are building good people, good souls.
But this is a very important point, even when you talk about energy transition,
yes.
Just energy transition.
Yes.
Means that, once again, as you mentioned, Malaysia produces far less than 1% of the emissions globally. But especially as an upper middle income country, we also do not receive official development assistance, so on and so forth. So this is a challenge, and this also segues into the need for finance instruments, especially in the context of a country like Malaysia. Now, everyone is talking about ESG, sustainable development, and now sustainable finance and investments. And Malaysia has, we do have very strong financial institutions, and we have had announcements of being a sustainable finance hub, and so on and so forth. But how can Malaysia position itself as a leader in sustainable finance within the region? We have, for example, Singapore, which is also a strong competitor within the region, of course. So how does Malaysia position itself as a leader in terms of sustainable finance hub?
This is a great question. I'm so glad you asked it because I think we haven't really maximized the opportunities accorded in terms of what's available overseas, internationally, to plug in our needs. Yeah, you look at Penang's success. There was an innovative financing model that Penang accessed. This was under the Penang Nature-Based Climate Adaptation Program, or PNB CAP. It became Malaysia's first ever nature-based climate adaptation program, and it was tailored based on our unique climate, our unique needs, and it was given the green light during a signing cooperation between UN Habitat and YB Nik Nazmi, the climate change and REC Minister, as well as Penang Chief Minister YB Chow Kuan Yeow. So what happened is, thanks to Think City led the initiative. It's a subsidiary under Khazanah, and they've done wonders in terms of planning for rejuvenation of cities. They received 42 million ringgit in funding from the World Bank's Adaptation Fund. But if you don't have a recognized entity, then you have to partner with one. So I think this is what Malaysia can do to the respective ministries to quickly identify agencies that can access this financing. It's meant for our needs. It's highly required. I was trained to look. There's one called, for example, Dr. Alizan will know this better, the Green Climate Fund. But again, you have to go through the bureaucracy to make sure that we are eligible, we can accept, we can access, and our organizations, local organizations that have been working hard on this front can utilize them effectively. So I think it's a race against time, but we certainly, the IFC is not the only one. We certainly just have to do more in this regard, and I'm sure the minister who were briefed on this issue is working on it. But this is why this know-how, this knowledge sharing is important, because it allows countries to know where exactly can you kind of plug in your needs, especially with regards to adaptation. So I think Telecom Malaysia, they know themselves, they identified their key assets, what's going to happen if flooding takes place, what's going to happen to even how they access them when, in a heavy disaster moment. So, yeah, so for me, I hope that we can quickly get registered, get the accreditation sorted so that we can access the financing.
Yes, certainly. There's many, as I mentioned, the good news is, although these are big sums, there is financing out there. But the problem is here and there. So you've got, as you mentioned, multilateral development banks, you've got financing in development finance institutions, you've got public money as well, you've got philanthropy, you've got various areas. So I guess that's my next question. We've heard a lot of buzzwords of public-private partnership before. Now we're talking about blended finance. Now, how do you see the collaboration between public and private, especially in terms of sustainable finance moving forward? Is this something also that's being looked upon within the committee?
So, we do look at the redundancies that exist, whether, through the various agencies. Malaysia, we have a lot of agencies. Not just to handle entrepreneurship, even the issues of grant giveaway. And it's not easy, in a sense, to merge. But I think in the last budget, we've just been announced, they will merge the 3 DFIs, Bank Pembangunan, the Exim Bank, as well as the SME Bank, again, to strengthen the DFI capacity in Malaysia. And I think that's an important kind of symbol of that resolve, the political will moving forward. But by the same token, part of our team member, they've worked on making sure that government data is integrated. I would invite you to take a look at data.gov.my. It becomes a central channel to kind of detail out government information or accessibility to the different agencies. But more needs to be done, not just on this front, but also take into account the fragmented social system, the different aid programs that exist in Malaysia. So I think the theme of the ACFIN committee is, again, making sure you integrate the data, because with better data, you have easier deployment and disbursement. But the 2 principles, and I'll end with this, the 2 principles that I feel the government should look at when you talk about accessibility and data itself. Within government, between agencies, we must not work in silos. We have to make sure that there's a clear-cut integration and sort of synthesize power well. But on the other front, when you're dealing with private sector, right, you talked about it. Yes, of course, we have to invite investments, but we have to have a clear, robust regulatory system, because you do have to take into account the dangers that it could pose, either to young minds, whether they're accessing the different devices, but also to make sure that at the end of the day, the consumer's interests and privacy is protected.
Thank you. I think someone's ready to hold up a red
We see your
card.
play card. We see your play card. You don't worry.
There.
It's very clear.
But before I just any last words you would like
No,
to
I don't know. She's allowing
impart?
us to give any last words.
As moderator, I'll allow it.
No, I'm just really, really pleased to see this initiative being discussed here in Parliament, and I would like to thank the UN. I know how much hard work that's being put in, and I think what's important is that we fully maximize, we fully utilize the different instruments out there, because at the end of the day, the SDGs, it's about how do we put value to what is living a life that's filled with quality. So again, it's not going to be easy. It's easier said for those who are able to come here, and it's going to be a lot harder to change lifestyles when you are affected by poverty and financial exclusion. In fact, the last bit is, let us also, as we look at the targets for renewables, the different agendas set out, take into account the challenges faced by the different sectors. In Europe, they are grappling with the phenomenon of fuel poverty. So even as you transition, there will be those who will be left behind. So the better we plan, the better we integrate our information with one another, and that helps with proper execution, inshallah.
Thank you, Madam Nurul Izzah. I think that's a very good way, an apt way to summarize this fireside chat. I think we are in a polycrisis, and the urgency is there, but the world is on fire, global boiling, and so on. But we need to have a transition plan that is just. That is, as the Madani framework puts it, it raises the floor, but also raises the ceiling as well. Now, this is, of course, very ambitious, very challenging, but I think, again, the money is out there, the instruments are there. Malaysia is a country that, again, we are an upper middle income country. Solutions probably have to come from within Malaysia, and I think, again, and there's some financial support as well, but it has to be a mix moving forward. And I think, again, congratulations to the organizers for bringing this dialogue forward. With that, thank you, Madam Nurul Izzah. Thank you to the audience, and time is up for the fireside chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alizan and Yang Bahagia Nurul Izzah, for this enlightening session on Fireside Chat. Please remain on stage, and we would like to invite Mr. Farouz Nada up on stage to present tokens of appreciation to Dr. Alizan and Yang Bahagia Nurul Izzah Anwar. Let's keep the applause going, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give them another round of applause as they make their way back to their seats.